Welcome to the Tone Lounge Podcast, the definitive music industry and gear podcast with Jonathan Gilmet and Frank Fleckenstein.
What's up, guys? Good morning and welcome to the Tone Lounge Podcast. It is episode number 32, and today is just the two of us on the other side. On the other side of the Atlantic, the Duke of Voxington, Jonathan Gilmet, ladies and gentlemen. And I'm Frank. I'm your humble co-host, coming in live from Germany, where things are getting colder and colder. I know you're going to say, well, what's cold?
I'm not going to say it. I'm not going to say it. I swear.
What's cold? Cold, really? Although, I think I'm gonna be fine for the most part because I have a routine since like 3 weeks or something. Every morning, I bought one of these like ice pots, to really be like in like super cold water for like 5 minutes. And to be honest, it's amazing. I've seen some sort of I've seen a guy that kind of puts all the benefits into a list, and the list is endless. So I just thought I try it out, and to be honest, I sleep better. I have more energy throughout the day, and I feel like I'm very close to getting rid of my morning coffee because afterwards you're super awake. So
this is the Wim Hof technique, isn't it?
Yeah, the thing is, a week after I started, I actually heard about where it all comes from, and that Wim Hof was the guy who kind of made it popular. I didn't know that before. I was just I saw that athletes certainly take advantage from that, and and then afterwards I read about this guy Wim Hof who made it popular and challenged himself to do even crazier things, like going to the Arctic or something, the Arctic Circle, and swim there and stuff like that. So it's really great. And the good thing is, I started when it kind of started to get colder here. So I just filled the thing up with water. And back then the water had like 15 degrees Celsius, so it was still like manageable. But then because the thing is outside, it is insulated to a certain extent, but not that much. And then the temperature dropped overnight, and now I'm at like 7 degrees. But I got there like gradually. So that was really good. And looking forward to dropping even further.
I'm too chicken to try it.
Yeah?
Oh, dude. I tried cold showers. Like, I was reading up on all the benefits of it, right? And I'm like, I can do it. And, I start the shower, and I just put it on, like, the coldest I can go. Yeah. And I just put my toes in. I'm like, oh, shit. Just like a shock to my heart. And then I try to go in. I try to wash my hair. It was the shortest shower I've ever taken. I still managed to wash all the good bits and get out of there. And then I hated myself for like an hour because I was just like freezing. I tried it for like a week, and at the end of the week I had like this sense of progression, like, hey, I'm starting to get the hang of it, because I'm a like all in or get the fuck out kind of guy.
Gotcha.
So it's like I can't go like slight decreases. I don't know why my brain doesn't work that way. With me, it's like it's either super hot, super cold, and you tolerate it or you don't. Anyways, I tried it for like a week. I was starting to get there, and then I stopped because normal showers are more comfortable. Yeah, nice temperature. It's like, oh, just gonna wash my body.
But that's the whole thing behind all of that. It's about like being uncomfortable in order to create a certain reaction inside your body. And I know, it's super comfortable to like take a hot bath or something. It's nice and cozy, but apparently the opposite has a lot of benefits. So, but before we turn this into a health podcast,
we might grow faster with that though.
Exactly, because it's health is something that everybody is concerned with. So not so much as guitar shit and whatnot.
No.
So first thing I would like to get into a little bit is, so in the past couple of weeks, I kind of gathered all the PCBs. PCB stands for printed circuit board, in case anyone is wondering. So it's essentially the circuit board of a pedal, and then you populate that with parts like resistors and capacitors and transistors and op amps and whatnot. And then you connect it and you get a pedal. And there are a few companies out there who make certain PCBs that are close to or direct copies of popular designs, like the Tube Screamer, the Blues Breaker, and even there's even a company in the US who actually sort of traces newer designs and tries to put them into this PCB format for everybody to, for the DIY community to be able to, build your own Tube Screamer or build your own King of Tone or whatever it is. Obviously, it is a lot easier with purely analog and mostly, overdrive, boost, that sort of units. It's a lot easier. It becomes more challenging once there is a delay chip, an echo chip in there, or if there's some digital stuff involved, then it's sort of for the more advanced guy. But I mean, essentially, if you look at the parts and if you have the time, you could build yourself a Tube Screamer for like $30-$35, pretty much. That doesn't involve the time invested. So essentially, when I kind of studied all these circuits before I built my own pedals, because I wanted to know how some of these circuits work, I bought like a ton of those and I built them, and then I eventually even put them into enclosures, and then I gave them to friends and whatnot, or I used them for comparisons. And recently I've put together a lot of those PCBs, just selling them for niche on local online marketplaces, because it's just sitting around. But one thing I've noticed, and it's something that I think it's important to point out, a lot of the designs that were made for what some people refer to as the second wave of pedal builders. So we had the first wave. We had guys like Roger Mayer, who started like in the mid to end 60s. And then we had sort of a second wave where there's guys like Pete Cornish, for example. Pete Cornish made a couple of circuits, such as the SS3 or the SS2, I'm not sure, but essentially that's the overdrive distortion circuit that Gilmour used for a lot of time. Some of the most popular Pink Floyd solos are like partially a result of that pedal. He also made, and that's something that I recently put together, an optical compressor. And an optical compressor is it's not like there's like some magic dust in there. It's a pretty simple circuit actually, but he has a like sort of different way to look at it and make something that is an optical compressor, but it's so much more. It sounds so much richer. It's almost like an always on pedal, even if you use like just a tiny bit of compression, because you don't want your signal to be compressed. It's going to enhance your signal. It's going to everything is going to sound so much richer. And so I look at that. I look at Mike Piera from Analog Man, who has obviously he has a waiting list that's like, I don't know, like 4 to 5 years, which is absolutely insane. But there's a reason for it. If you ever had the chance to open one of his pedals, everything is like well selected. It looks like how pedals were made around the time he started. He never changed a thing. And some of the circuits are like so well thought out. They're so genius, absolutely genius. And I think we have to appreciate what these guys did 40, 50 years ago. Mike Pierre obviously a little bit later, but like some guy like Pete Cornish who made pedal boards for Jimmy Page, for Christ's sake. These guys have, or take the guy who invented the Tube Screamer. Today,
yep.
There are so many TS type pedals out there that essentially, if you wanted to create your own version of it or your adaptation or your mod, you have a starting point, and it's fairly easy to find. You just get one of those PCBs, you look at it, you look at the schematics, and you can start to experiment. The guy who made the Tube Screamer did not have that. He started from scratch. He was like, so what could I, how could I put something together that's essentially going to push a tube amp into oblivion if I wanted to? And the genius you need to have to come up with something like that is, to my understanding, is very, very different from what some of the, and I say this with the uttermost respect, some of these like pedal builders have that, they had it fairly easy, in comparison to these guys.
Mm-hmm.
So this is just me geeking out and, appreciating and hailing the guys who had to put in all that work. Like, it had to be like hours and hours and hours of trial and error until you get to the result you wanted. And then you had to kind of design that into a PCB, and PCBs compared at that time compared to PCBs today were like so rudimental, like absolutely basic. And you can see that if you open a Tube Screamer from the early 80s and you open one today, it's like you can't even compare the stuff you can build today.
I had a Japanese, I forget the brand because back then I didn't really care what was written on the box. So I had it was a fuzz and a wah in one pedal. And I remember opening it up to look inside, and I shit you not, it wasn't a PCB, it was actually cardboard where everything was laid out on it.
Oh, yeah.
It was like a little wafer there. You could grab it and pop it if you wanted to. So it was super fragile.
Yes.
I had never seen that before. But to me at that time, that circuit was completely different than everything else I had ever played before, because it's this big rowdy fuzz with a wah in it. And you had this little switch that you could switch between the both of them. And it seems to me like back, if you go to the 60s and 70s, there were way less people playing pedals than we have right now. And I'm saying that with 100% confidence because a lot of the guys that are not into pedals are often some of the older generation. Like, they didn't really grow up with that stuff. But a lot of the great circuits that came out, like some of the originals, were from their era. When you think of the fuzz face, the tone bender, the treble booster, phasers, flangers, the Rat, the Proco Rat is another really original circuit that we don't often talk about. You've seen like so many clones of it on all these different pedal boards, and it can be used for like super light breakup to like all the way like fuzzy kind of tones. And that was very unique for the time. Now we're spoiled. We have all these different clones and adaptation and quote unquote improvement on these circuits. But oftentimes you'll find if you go down that rabbit hole of trying to find like the perfect Rat or the perfect Tube Screamer, you always come back to the original design. Like, You can try all these fancy boutique things, and then you just come back to the original and you say, there's nothing broken about it. Why the hell am I paying $300 for a clone? You know? So that's something else to consider.
Definitely. And also, what I think is, if there is an opportunity for people to make money, they usually grab it. And essentially, there's nothing wrong about it. But what I do have a problem with is, and that's as soon as I started to know more and have more knowledge about circuit design and look at at a schematic of a pedal, and then obviously the internet is just full of stuff. You can search for everything, and you can find the original Tube Screamer design, and you can find this and this and that. What I have a problem is there are builders out there, some of them quite popular actually, who claim to have that their design is original, and actually it's not. And they use every possible method in order to kind of hide the fact that it's not an original design, Whereas we talked to Roman from Schnobeltone, who happened to work with a guy who had an original design. And I actually, afterwards, I actually made the effort to look at the schematic, because it was obviously traced by people, and there's, you can actually buy a PCB from that, US website to build your own daily driver. And so I was looking at the schematic, and I've never seen a schematic like this. Never, ever. There's nothing that comes even close to what the guy who Roman is working with has come up with. It's an original design. And it seems like it is more difficult to come up with an original design and sell that to someone than doing a clone or an adaptation or a mod of something and selling it. It seems like it's way easier to say, I've come up with a stripped down Tube Screamer that sounds more like Stevie Ray Vaughan, and people are like, take my money.
It's an excellent point you're bringing about that. You have to think about, let's say if we were to use the mindset of a guitar player and put it into any other realm, like cars, right? You want to buy a car. Oh, I just want to buy Ford because Ford was the original inventor of the popular vehicle that everyone is driving. Fuck Subaru, man. I don't want to buy anything made offshore. No, I prefer it made here. If you went with that mindset about everything, you would be painting yourself in a corner, because there's every market out there has people cloning and copying and trying to improve on a design. I do appreciate people trying to improve on certain things. So if you take a fuzz pedal that is super cool but noisy as hell, I really appreciate when someone can come in, study the design of this particular pedal, and make it so that it can work with buffers. You can place it anywhere on your pedal board. Those kind of things are very cool. I think the issue, and a lot of us get everything kind of mixed up when it comes to pedals, is exactly what you were saying earlier. You have a Tube Screamer and someone is pretending that they just reinvented a new circuit, but it's completely based on, let's say, a Tube Screamer, and they just change a few things here and there to make it sound different, and now they're claiming they have a completely new circuit. It's the claim that you have something new, instead of saying, I've taken this awesome circuit that everyone reveres, and I've made something different with it. It's still inspired by this, but here is what's different about it. Much more, tangible thing for people to absorb and say, okay, I get it. It's another Tube Screamer, but hey, it's not just another Tube Screamer.
Yeah.
He's done this, and that with it. If we had that conversation, I think it would be better than just someone saying, hey, I just invented something completely new that you've never seen before.
Yeah.
Is there really a demand for that? Kind of hard to say.
You are familiar with the Timmy, right?
Yep. I have a Tim V3. So.
Tim V3. Okay.
Yep.
So again, I don't want to name names, but essentially there's a guy whose pedals are very popular. They're also very expensive because they're like very boutiquey, and a lot of people. So he had a lot of, let's say, celebrity support. Let's put it this way. And the guy made an overdrive pedal. I think he released it in 2017 or something. And obviously, when something becomes more popular, guys like some of these guys that make PCBs for you to make your own, they trace it. And some people are really, really good with like tracing the pedal, and like they actually they make an X-ray of the PCB to see where all the connections and traces go, which I find, amazing. Some people have like a small X-ray machine at home for stuff like that. And this guy claimed that it was an original circuit, and he actually put in different parts, like different components on the PCB to kind of distract people, and those parts had no connection with anything. So he was just, putting like a capacitor there, a resistor there, and whatnot. And the guy who traced the pedal and like checked the PCB was like, okay, those are not connected. Let's see if there is something that's close to that. So essentially, the guy found out that it's identical to a Timmy, with obviously some tweaks, and you can like change the treble response and whatnot. But the guy, this pedal builder was like very, very sort of sneaky, putting in, distraction parts in order for people to, when they look at it at first, like in the first moment, they were like, oh, okay. Oh yeah. Seems to be original because there are all these parts in there, why would you put parts in there if they don't have a function? So,
is it a pedal of love?
No.
Okay. So
it's not a love pedal. As far as I know, love pedal actually, I think most of their designs are original, if I'm not mistaken.
I follow Paul Cochran on Facebook, and he seems to have a tooth to grind with Love Pedal. Claiming that they've copied one of his pedals.
Okay.
I don't know. I have no horse in this race, so I really can't say. But I have seen him on a few occasions point the finger at a few companies saying that they were just flat out copying his circuit. And I can understand the perspective of when you've come up with something original and you're not like a big name, you're not JHS, you're not Wampler, you're not Boss, and you have like maybe a handful of really original circuits you've come up with, and someone comes along, copies the same or basically the same architecture that you came up with, and now they're making a shit ton of money.
Yeah.
And you're still like barely breaking even with your pedals, and you got the notoriety that comes with it, but you don't have the reach. Like if you want to buy a Tim, a V3 or a Timmy, you have to buy it from Humbucker. I think it's humbucker.com. It's an American music store. That's where I bought my Tim V3. And look, you have to keep up with Paul on Facebook to see when he's bringing the pedals over. So he just basically builds everything, puts it in a box. He goes to the music store and he hands it off to them. And then he tells people, I got like 250 unit ready for sale.
Wow.
You better jump and fucking get it. Because these things go fast.
Yeah.
Like super fast. So, if a guy has to work this way because he doesn't have all the means that, let's say, some other bigger company has, and they come in, they copy his circuit, they name it something different, and they're selling a fuck ton of it, I can understand from his perspective that he might be a bit sour that people are doing that to him. I know that the Hot Cake is another pedal where it's an original circuit, and most people are kind of hesitant to copy that circuit just because they know that's primarily all this guy makes.
Yeah.
And it's made at home. It's not like a big outfit or anything.
Yeah.
So there's a question of ethics in there when it comes to pedal building. I don't know what it is. Like personally, I really don't know what the answer would be, but if I'm to ask you a question, you can just give me your opinion and we'll go from there. But do you think a pedal has to reach a certain amount of sales before it's ethically okay to say, okay, there's enough of these on the market from this one company that we can now start like taking it apart, building our own and selling it?
So, when it comes to ethics, I think, and since we're talking about electronics, when it comes to ethics, the first thing that kind of disappeared is when companies started to build their stuff in China, for example. Because what these guys do, and I mean that with all respect, because I also, like, for some of the PCBs that I do myself, I work with Chinese companies because they make good PCBs, and I need good PCBs for a reasonable price. If I make my PCBs in Europe, my pedal is going to cost like twice the price because the PCBs are like super expensive. So, but essentially, a lot of these Chinese companies, especially these OEM makers, they looked at a design, they looked at a circuit, and they were like, oh yeah, we can make this as a mini pedal, super convenient, and Amazon's going to sell it for $29.
Yeah.
So this is there's your ethics, like, flying out the window, going overboard. That's the first thing. So apparently there's no ethics about that in China, for example. And then also, on the other end, a lot of people apparently do not have the capacity to make out differences between an original circuit and some cheap copy, because they keep buying those. They buy them and like, no, it sounds exactly like my Tube Screamer. No, I can't believe it. Does it? I bet a few people would definitely beg to differ. And I know that some people really have really good ears, really analytic good ears, and they can definitely hear the difference, between a cheap copy and an original circuit. And I think to answer your question, like in sort of a broader sense, to be honest, I don't think there's anything ethical about, like, okay, now this guy had like 3 years of success with his original design. Now we'll just trace a pedal, find out how it works, and make our own version or something. I don't think there's anything ethical about it. The question is, why does it still happen, and why do people still jump on those ships and throw money at these guys? And we have to differentiate a little bit, of course. If Brian Wampler makes what was this clone called? You also have one, right?
The Tumnus. Yeah, I have the Tumnus Deluxe and the Mini. Yeah,
exactly. Is it an original design from Bill Flanagan? Yes, it is. And this one had the magic diodes, So he made how many? 1,000?
Of the original clone?
The germanium Tumnus?
Oh, okay, the germanium Tumnus. I think it was 1,000 that were made for the mini version, and about roughly the same for the deluxe version.
Yeah, exactly. Brian Wampler, now we might think, regarding of what I just said before, okay, but Brian Wampler is essentially doing exactly that. He's taken the clone circuit and he's like replicating it and making money with it. Why? Because there's a market demand. there's a market demand, and people, whoever is faster to kind of supply the market's demand, then good for you. I think the issue is we are not able. There's no chance you can patent a schematic.
No, that's very true. Yeah.
It's impossible to. Apparently, it's impossible to do that. I wonder how this works, and I don't have enough experience. I wonder how this works in like other electronic industries, like with Apple, for example. I know that there are people who are like kind of going into that Apple direction, but Apple still manages to keep their ecosystem completely closed. And because once you're in there, and I'm guilty myself. I have an iPhone, and this is a Mac Mini, because it's just really, really convenient. Because it just works. It just works. I used to build my own computers for maximum performance and and everything, and I had so many issues. And at some point, I was like, "Wait, I'm working for it to work. That's not right. This thing I should just switch it on and it should work. Because I want to get things done with the machine. I don't want to spend time getting the machine ready." So, yeah,
I think I may have the answer, and this is just me kind of extrapolating on some of the things that I already kind of know about the guitar pedal industry versus, let's say, something like high technology.
Right.
I think it has to do with the fact that we're dealing with really old components when it comes to guitar pedals. There's no real innovation going on with an analog pedal. Now, if we're going with, let's say, a phone, you're dealing with primarily a lot of money being dumped into research into new chips, so more processing powers, more capability in terms of Wi-Fi, this and that, right? Resolution. Yeah. So perhaps what makes it almost impossible for smaller companies to keep up with someone like Apple or Samsung or whatever is the fact that they already are at this with a lot of money invested. They probably have exclusive deals with certain companies that are manufacturing the batteries, the screens, et cetera, When it comes to guitar pedals, well, most of the circuits are really old. The components are not things that are still like massively produced because we're still using it across the board on everything we have at home. A lot of those resistors and, transistors and all the stuff that go into the guitar pedal are mostly antiquated at this point, and they're kind of hard to get, and there's not many people building them for us anymore. So I think that may be the difference in why Apple can keep like complete lid and control over their product, while someone like Ibanez can't prevent anyone from copying any of their designs, because everything they're using, they can't say, okay, we got this new chip we're putting in here and we're going to be the only people that can get our hands on it. No one can reproduce it, because that company, if you reproduce that chip, they have like whatever, a patent on it. They're going to sue you to hell, So perhaps that would explain why our industry, as opposed to other industries, is so fragile. Everyone can just come in and bounce off of what you're doing.
I think one of the other things might be that maybe it's a lack of foresight, because obviously the guy who invented the Tube Screamer, apparently he didn't think it was, it would make sense to file, for a patent on the schematic, and apparently that also applies for guys like Pete Cornish or whoever. And I think because that hasn't been done in the first place, now it's impossible to do.
That's very much possible.
That's that might be the other reason. And essentially, some of these guys used parts that were used in a lot of other appliances, or even in military appliances, diodes and transistors and whatnot. That's why sometimes with tubes you have like a commercial name for a tube and you have a military name because they were used in appliances for the military. So these guys were actually using components that were not intended to be in a pedal and to create an overdrive sound or to
exactly.
they were originally used for other things. And that maybe that's part of it too. So I'd really like to talk to the inventor of the Tube Screamer now, to be honest.
Another question I have about pedals is, let's say something like this. This is a new pedal from Wampler, all digital.
Yeah.
Now, what I'm wondering is, let's say Wampler's working with a certain company that is building unique digital chips for their pedal. Does that mean that for someone else who wants to make, like, let's say a copy of this, they want to make, like, I don't know, something made offshore, it's going to be a fraction of the price of this thing. What I think might be the issue is that, one, it's really, really tough if they want to copy the algorithms that go into a digital processor. So if you want to make it sound exactly the same, you don't know the codes, you don't know anything that went into it. So how would you go about making an actual clone of this unless you just make it look like it and you come up with your own algorithms? And then when it comes to the parts, would the parts, because it's a new technology, would it be viable for most people to say, okay, I'm just going to buy directly from these guys. They're the only one manufacturing these processors. I'm going to put it in the pedal. I'm going to sell it for $39. Maybe digital might be the thing that rebalances this whole we copy other people's pedals. You need people that are very different when it comes to engineers.
Very, 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 very good point. And that's what I said in the beginning when I was talking about all these PCBs that you can buy, to build your own Tube Screamer or clone or whatnot. It is way easier to reverse engineer something that's an overdrive pedal or a compressor or a distortion or whatever than sort of reverse engineering something that's digital and uses chips where you can, start coding your own algorithms in to create a sound. That's way more difficult. So that's why if you look at some of these websites, and I'm just going to mention them because, people will find them anywhere. So one of the biggest sellers of like PCBs that you can, build your own pedals is pedalpcb.com. And they also have digital pedals, but they all are based on a commercially available chip that is used in a lot of like small multi effects. It's called the FV1. It's like was it 24-bit? I think it's a 24-bit effect chip, and this comes with a co-processor that you also need to buy. That one has the algorithms, and it's just like sort of controlling what the main chip does.
Okay,
and that's pretty much the only way for the average person to somehow create a digital effects pedal. Everything else usually is proprietary. And then it really depends how good you are at coding and how tight you're coding it. And that's why companies like Fractal Audio, for example, had such a success with their units because it's Shark DSPs. So those are like really powerful DSPs who can, work under a lot of load. But those are, you need someone who really knows their shit with coding to be able to, get the best out of those. And Cliff Chase was one of these guys, who was like, because he came from a complete different realm, where he was, I think he also he was like working for a military contractor and, working with, I'm not sure, the satellites or something, or like really high-tech stuff. So for him, it was like, oh yeah, Shark DSP. No, fine. Doop 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 doop. Marshall amp. Doop doop Fender amp. So so with digital, it's very difficult to reverse engineer in comparison to analog, of course. Analog, there it's fairly easy.
And I think that's where we're seeing a real shift in pedal making. We're going from, and I don't mean to piss off anyone when I say this, I mean this with actual respect, but you just get a musician who doesn't know anything about engineering, opens up, the most basic volume pedal or the most basic fuzz pedal, can look at it, can try to, mimic what they're seeing, get some information off the web. And a few years later, they're making pedals without being actual engineers. They just really understand how to put the pedals together and how to get like a really low noise floor. But they're not engineers. They're not electrical engineers. Like, for example, there's Jim Hagerman in Hawaii that makes like 2 bass pedals, and he makes amplifiers. And this guy, if you go on his website or if you follow him on Facebook, all he does is talk specs all day, and he has like all these like different screenshots of the sine wave going through and how they're being affected by his tube pedals and stuff like that. And he doesn't make clones. He makes his own pedals based on his knowledge. He's been doing this since I think 1982. So, he's an actual electrical engineer. He's been to university. He's been working on a whole bunch of things, and now he makes pedals and he loves what he does. But he's barely known, and I've demoed quite a few pedals of his, and every time they're super simple, and I have to ask him, like, what was your goal when you made this pedal? And then he tells me, and I go, oh yeah, okay, now it's evident. And how does a dummy like me not figure out what the hell this guy's trying to do? Well, it's just because he's taking it from a very different standpoint than, let's say, just a tube screamer or a volume boost or whatever. He's always has like this intention of creating a pedal that has a very specific goal. And he knows how to go about it, and he's not shy about sharing what he does because he knows most people don't understand shit about making pedals. So then you see the comment section, you have all these other guys trying to argue with him about like plate voltage for the tubes, and they're saying that there's no way he can run it. And then he shows you all the results in the test, and he's like, just shut the fuck up, dude. You don't know what the hell you're talking about. So I love that. And if I can, at some point, I'm going to try to invite him on. I'm not going to be able to keep up with the conversation, but perhaps you will. But he seems like a really brilliant guy.
Yeah, I also don't have an engineering background. I never studied electrical engineering. But yeah, due to my work in MI and being in touch with technicians and working with technicians who were pretty much like this guy you just explained to me, where I once worked with an Italian company on an amplifier series. That was the time when I was still in product design, and it was just amazing. We I explained them on the actual amplifier, like what I think should be like tweaked. It's like, we need more gain here. We need some kind of low cut here. We need no. And they were writing all that down, and then they went to their lab, and like 2 hours later they came back and they essentially done everything I said, which is like, how the hell? And this is something that you need to be an electrical engineer to be able to, do that. Yeah. And you're right. Most people are not. And that's something that happened during the pandemic. It's like a lot of people who sort of, were like, okay, right now I can't play shows. I can't, play concerts and whatnot. There are no sessions, but I know sound. I could try to build pedals, and suddenly, boom, you have this explosion of pedal companies during the pandemic, and most of those companies is just like, one guy making fuzz pedals or making like the Range Master, just like the original, which reminds me of that I just built my first Range Master sort of pedal together with my son.
Oh yeah.
Which is really fun because this pedal has the lowest component count ever. it's just like 1, 2, 3, 4. It's 5 resistors, capacitors. It's 2 or 3 resistors. Is 1 transistor. This one is a silicone transistor. 3 controls. 1 on-off switch. That's it. It's like essentially 11, 12 parts, and you have a sort of Dallas Rangemaster. Not the original germanium version, but yeah, it's gonna do. I checked it out, played it in front of a sort of Marshall-y kind of amp. It sounded absolutely killer, and it's like, it's so easy. Why make it complicated?
Yeah, why overthink it? But then again, that's another example of, I think, what we were talking about, like original circuits, like the Dallas Rangemaster. A lot of people that were playing those were playing very different amps than what we play today. So if you think of a Vox AC30 from the 1960s, sounds very different than the new ones, because the old ones, as you crank them up, they would get woolly and dark.
Yes.
So that's where you needed something like a treble booster so that the amp wouldn't fold in on itself and it would cut through. Now I have like more like modern reissue versions of some of those amps, but they're very different. They're super bright. So if you throw a treble booster in there, it's not a fun time. Like, it's very bright and brash, and it's like, ugh, not my thing. But with a woolly sounding amp, like some of those old Laney amplifiers, like the Clip from Laney, I think it was Tony Iommi that would play those. You throw a tube, not a tube screamer, but a treble booster in the front of that. That's magical. Like, that sounds freaking killer. But if you throw that in front of like a modern amplifier that has like really nice bright tones, you're not going to like what you hear, because it's going to be very different in terms of what you're expecting. You have a bright amp and you throw in a treble booster, you're going to be like, why do I need more treble?
Yeah, exactly. That's what happened gradually with amplifiers over the years, where they adapted the so-called bright cap in order to kind of fix that problem of you crank the amp up and it's kind of losing some of the sparkle, and some of the high end. And I mean, that's what some of the original guys who kind of modded amplifiers did. They wanted these things were designed to be like cranked and then have like the power amp distortion, and guitar players wanted more, and they wanted at like a more moderate volume, so they modded the Marshall to have more gain out of the preamp, and they modded the bright cap. Some of these amps, actually, I've seen a couple of modded Marshalls that have like a switchable bright cap, so you can run this as if it was like an old 70s 80s Marshall. But if you want a more modern thing, you just change the value of the bright cap with a switch, and suddenly it doesn't get woolly, and it doesn't fold in on itself. So more geniuses, more.
And I think what you just explained gives another angle on how it used to be engineers that would make these modifications, as opposed to someone who just works in a shop, has done a few mods on the amp, knows this kind of like the secret sauce, and will replicate this. If you go to someone that is an engineer and you say, hey, look, I'm having this issue, they're going to be like, okay, let me do my thing. And a few days later, you get a call and fixed your amp and done the mods you wanted, and you plug in and holy shit, this is a completely different amp. Yeah, it takes an engineer to understand the architecture of that circuit so that they can modify it and do the things that you want. And if you bring it to some guy who just happens to do mods, maybe this person isn't qualified to do this, and they're going to have to spend 5 hours on the internet trying to find out how to do it. Go on a forum and read what other people are writing. So I think that's kind of
this
where
can be
we're
very
going.
dangerous, by the way. This is looking up forums, can be super helpful, but only if the forum has a reputation for like people floating around there who really have what they're talking about. Otherwise,
yes,
it's gonna shit, can do so much wrong.
That's why I think we're probably seeing a return to engineering, but a very different kind of engineering. Because I don't remember which episode, but we had talked about, like, since we're going towards digital, who the hell is going to repair your
Yes.
old vintage amp, right? So we talked about that. So that's a technology that is slowly moving to the wayside. And now there's this technology that we've been kind of embracing and still we still have some resistance towards digital. But as we're going there, we're going to see now engineers, but a very different type of engineers. It's going to be people coding, for amplifiers and using all these new digital technologies, which I think is probably going to get all the DIY guys to move to the side as well. They're only going to be able to do the old stuff. The new stuff is going to require a different mindset and probably way more knowledge about, how to build pedals than what it used to be before, because you're not going to be like tactically in there just, populating a PC board that you bought from China. And now you're going to be like, okay, I need to buy this chipset. I need to buy this. I need to buy that. And if it doesn't work, you're fucked. Because if you don't know how to troubleshoot the digital stuff, it might be a different scenario in the years to come. I don't know. I'm just presuming here. But I think as we go towards that, we're going to see like very qualified people doing this stuff and less DIY. There might be more like modding of the enclosure or taking everything in a pedal and putting it inside another pedal. That might be A-okay.
Yes.
But
yeah,
for the rest, I'm not sure.
And also, we need to be really straight, self-reflective, and honest about two things. A, if people think that when they buy, let's say, a PCB copy of a King of Tone, let's say a King of Tone or a Timmy, and they put in all the parts exactly like it is described, if they think they get the original unit, they're out to lunch. They're not paying attention, because you'll never, especially with guys like Cochrane or Mike Piera, you'll never have the machinery, the experience, and the time to select your parts in a way that you have next to no tolerance. And the unit is going to be like absolutely spot on. So that's one thing. So people are kidding themselves if they think, oh yeah, I'm just gonna go to Pedal PCB and or what other website where you can buy these PCBs. I'm gonna populate it, put it in an enclosure, and then I have a King of Tone for like nothing, and I'm not going to wait 4 years. I don't have to pay $500 for the pedal, etc., etc. Yeah. Be realistic. When you do that, I encourage everybody to, be as DIY as possible, and build your pedal. It's fun. It's really educational. You have to kind of manage your time, because at some point, especially if you have a family, because you're going to spend a lot of time populating the PCB, and the second thing we have to keep in mind: not everybody is well equipped and capable of soldering on PCBs, because that's soldering a jack on a guitar, or soldering pots, or like a cable inside your guitar electronics is one thing. That's it's very elemental. Soldering on a PCB is a complete different thing. Needs a really good soldering iron with a really good transformer that keeps the temperature consistent, and you need to know how to do it. I've seen some DIY work from people who claim to be like, I can do it, no worries. I've seen some of the PCBs. They look like shit, and they're like full of soldering material everywhere, and they're almost like they're trying to solder it to the point where the PCB was like melting.
Oh shit! Yeah, no,
it's definitely not going to help with the design. So you have to keep these two things in mind. There's a reason the guys who are at the forefront, guys like Mike Piera and Pete Cornish, they not only know their shit when it comes to the schematic and the engineering part, they also know how to work their machines.
Mm-hmm. And they know the end result too. They know what it's supposed to sound like.
Yeah, exactly. That's the other thing. Some people, and I think we talked about that at some point, where it seems like we have these. We might have even talked about it with Brian Wampler, where you have these two kinds of pedal builders. You have the guys who were mainly engineers, but they liked playing guitar, and like Robert Keeley, for example, who is like a mastermind engineer, absolute bonkers. And and a guy like Wampler, who slowly came into this and whatnot, but he said he doesn't have a background in engineering, right?
Yeah, he said he didn't. He just kind of learned.
Yeah,
like he
learned along the way.
Learned along the way.
Exactly. And you have these two guys, and sometimes you have a guy who not only is an engineer, but he also is he has a good set of ears. And I think that's kind of rare. There's not many guys out there who can play a kick-ass guitar and have amazing tone, good ears to analyze what's going on, and their engineering is spot on. Not many guys out there. Just a few.
It's
more kudos to those.
Yeah, and it's definitely not for everybody. Like, you could order some pedals and start building them yourself and have fun, but you might be able to do an excellent job on your own pedals because you had ample time to build it. Now, when it comes to you producing, let's say, 10 units to sell this month, the stress might be on now, and you might be cutting corners, and that's where you get to find out whether you have really good work ethics and whether you can sustain this. And I think that this concept of just being a great engineer is one thing, but are you also a good businessman? Can you sustain this? Can you find the contacts? Do you have the foresight to seeing your growth in the next 5 years? I mean, there's so much shit that goes behind building pedals or building amplifiers or guitars or whatever it is in this industry, that sometimes you have to be honest and say to yourself, I want my company to go further, but I can't do this on my own because, one, I don't understand shit about taxes. I don't know the difference between just being a civilian paying taxes and being a small business. What are the benefits? How much money do I have to save up? Overhead, am I going to be in my garage where I don't have to pay rent, or do I have to move to a smaller facility where I'm going to have a price increase on my pedals because I have to pay overhead, I have to pay electricity and all this shit. I mean, there's so much stuff beyond just building the pedal that when you look at all this stuff, you put it together and you bring it back home, you ask yourself, okay, how many of these people can we name that are people that came up with an original circuit that really invented this, and they became big stars, everyone knows their name? Not very many. They're all still paying their bills and doing stuff like everybody else. We know their pedals, we know their circuits. You were mentioning the person who invented the Tube Screamer. If I'm not mistaken, that's the same person who invented the Maxon SD9.
Yeah.
So I think it's the same person. And those are two awesome pedals. I have the SD9 mod. It's a bit of a pain in the ass to dial in, but when you find that sweet spot, holy shit, dude, it sounds good.
Yeah.
It's a good sounding pedal. But if you don't have the right parameters, it can sound like shit too. Mainly because of the player, in this case, me. On a bad day, it's oh my God, what am I doing with this pedal? But on perfect days, holy shit, I've got to put this on my pedal board. I know this guy invented it, probably didn't know that some schmuck like me would be struggling to find, the right tone. But on good days, I'm holy shit, the SD9 is awesome.
And, I remember that when I was studying circuits, the SD9 was one of them. When I went into looking at distortion pedals. So I was looking at the SD9, and I actually bought one of these PCBs where you can build your own. And yeah, analyze them, look at the connections, and I kind of went with Mike Matthews, 70s method of like, oh, hey, Mike, we don't have, these resistors. Well, which ones do we have? We have the other ones. Oh, let's just use these, And so what I did was I put this thing together, and I didn't have like, I think I had the wrong capacitors. I was like, the value wasn't that much off, but I didn't have the ones that were like required according to the manual. So I was like, whatever. Put it in there, sounded like shit. Sounded like absolute horseshit. No way I could dial this in front of any amplifier. It was impossible to do. So I was like, okay, maybe that's your first lesson. You cannot cut corners, and you have to stick to your design, and you have to stick to values and whatnot, and you should find consistency when you're making pedals. Otherwise, the result is going to differ, and you're gonna have one guy who bought a pedal from you who's like, oh, this sounds terrible, and the guy's like, what are you talking about? It's amazing, best pedal I've ever played. So it's a good thing to learn. I actually have I still have like an absolute dream project, which I'm going to start probably next week or the week after, I'm not sure. So remember that we once talked about the Lab series amplifiers?
Yep.
The ones that were built by Gibson, and how the L5 was like, I had an L5 once. So it's just a great sounding amp because of King's X and whatnot, and Ty Tabor, who had like some amazing tones out of there. I still want to build a modern version of an L5 amp in some sort of compact format, because it is a solid state amp. So, you don't need a big transformer or something. And with today's technology, like a good Class D power amp, there are some really good Class D power amps out there. It has to be possible to like recreate this thing so that it like maintains the original tone of the L5, but you put it in a more convenient package. So that's still something that I really want to do, just for the fun of it, because I'm interested.
And you can do it. Not everybody can do that, but the fact that you have the capacity to be able to build your own amp or build your own pedals or put together your own guitar. I mean, you get to do something that a lot of people wish they could do, but most of us can't. Like if you sent me a DIY kit to build a pedal, I could tell you I would shit the bed on that one, because I don't have patience and I don't have a steady hand. And when I get stressed out, I cut corners, even though I don't want to. At least I'm honest about it, and I know myself. So I'm not the guy who's going to start a pedal company. I'm not the guy who's going to start an amp building company, just because, I get overly stressed about like all the minutia and all this stuff. And I'm like, I'm not smart enough. What the fuck am I doing? So at least when you can admit it, that's great. But I do have, a lot of respect for people like yourself that can just say, you know what, fuck it, I'm going to build my own amp. What? I have to save money. I have to scour the internet to find one. Here you are building your own, like, Jesus. I'd love to be able to do that.
It's, yeah. I don't know. It's kind of it's very nerdy in a way. It's like a very nerdy thing. And one thing is for sure, I think as an electrical engineer, you're not going to get women, because if you're as nerdy as some of these guys, there's no way, you're gonna get women. Hey, here, have a new schematic for an amazing amp. You want to see it? Bye.
Yeah. Drawn on a napkin. Drawn on a napkin. Here, honey, what do you think of this?
Imagine you're on the first date, and suddenly you get the idea for like the schematic of a lifetime, and it's like I just revolutionized how how certain pedals or certain amps work or whatever, and you put it down, and then on the other side you have the woman's like, the hell is he doing? Like amazing woman. It's like, sorry, I have to write that down. Can you give me more of the napkins? And he's making a mosaic out of.
Yeah, and you think of any musician listening to us right now, try to think of your significant other when you talk about your latest and greatest acquisition when it comes to gear and what it's going to bring to the table for you in terms of, playing live or playing in the studio. It's like, oh, I got this new pedal, and this one here is using this chipset from the 1980s, and they're really hard to find, so I had to pay $200 more, but you're going to hear my tone. You're going to shit the floor. My wife doesn't care. And the moment I say the word pedal, I can see her eyes get glazed. It's like she's just pretending to listen to me. And before I used to go on a rant and I would talk about this shit. And at some point I could tell like everyone was about to fall asleep. So now it's like I catch myself sooner and I just shut up because I know I'm going too far. It's like, I got a new pedal. My wife goes, okay, I'm not going to tell you about it, but it's really fun. Okay, good for you, honey. All right, supper time. So I can just imagine the electrical engineer sitting down with his wife of like 10 years and putting the circuit in front of her. Do you see what I did here? No, Robert, I don't. Do you see what I did here? Look. Do you see these resistors? They're not in the same place anymore. And look, I managed to put a buffer, but towards this, we don't do it that way anymore. But I revived it. Look at it. That's great, Robert. All right. Okay. Sweet. Okay. Now can we do something else?
Yeah, exactly. We should get going. Neighbors are expecting us for dinner.
Yeah. We're late for the Christmas party.
We're late for the Christmas party. Santa Claus is around the corner. It's true. Some of that stuff is like absolutely nerdy. But it's also fun. It kind of keeps us on our toes, and apparently some people have an emotional response with these sort of things, and other people just don't.
Yeah.
I think it's the same thing with computer games or like some of these movie franchises where if you tell some people like, have you seen the new Star Wars? And so it's like, I haven't even seen the first one. So I don't care.
Look, passionate people are like that. It's just that when you go into more technical stuff, it seems that it's less accessible. If you're into gaming and you're like, hey, like my daughter's really into Valorant, okay? Mm-hmm. And she's like, oh my God, there's this new season coming up and they got new skins, and she's telling me all this stuff. And I kind of tune out too. I'm like, oh yeah, that's cool. Do you think I can buy it when it comes out? Oh, we'll see when we get there. And I'm almost like dismissive because it's not my bag, right? So if you're into cars and someone you ask someone that's into cars like, hey, my car is making this really weird noise, and then you start to mimic the noise, and the guy's like, oh yeah, that could be this, and they start talking your ear off for like 45 minutes. You're like, I should have just shut up. Well, I think it's the same thing with guitars, right? Hey, you play guitar, right? My brother-in-law plays guitar. Yeah, I play guitar. What do you play? Oh, shit. You gone and done it, boy.
It's, that's something that happened to me once. So I used to go to 2 or 3 like local clubs where they played like heavier music here in town. And as soon as some of the guys who are also playing in bands knew that I was working at that music store and that others had told them, oh, this guy has like lots of knowledge, he knows so much stuff. Suddenly I find myself, I just wanted to, have a beer, enjoy the music. And, by 2 or 3 o'clock, I'm going to be like completely shit-faced and going home. Here I am, in like, I'm out of my work hours, but I find myself in a conversation where 2 or 3 guys are like asking me shit all the time. But I was like, hey, how do I get this sound? I was like, oh, for fuck's sake. Why, why didn't I just, wear a mask or something?
Yeah.
With a
Just
different face.
go incognito in the back, dressed as Gandalf in the back.
Yeah. Seems like I need to go to a different city and drink my beers there because nobody knows that I'm, working in a local music store. I'm not sure.
And I'm sure most of the people listening to this podcast are probably in that kind of situation too, where they know a lot about gear and they listen to us talk. And maybe when we get it wrong, they're like screaming at their phone going, you fucking idiot. It wasn't released in 82. It was released in 83. And that's the only time like they can hear other people that are nerdy like them and know stuff, And then you probably got the other people that they want to know this stuff. They're starting to get into it. So now they're looking for podcasts that talk about gear because they're really into it and it drives them. They want to know where the pedal was built and who built it and the reason for it. And, so I think there's probably like.
Sometimes it's interesting. And that's funny. You never know. There's no way you can know what's going to trigger a reaction. It's that time when we talked about the Ritter amplifier. There was like. How much? Like 200,000 or something? I'm not sure how many. 10,000. It was like a ridiculously high price.
Yeah.
And I just found this to be like completely ridiculous. And we made fun about it as well. And I think it's fair to, make fun about it. It's not like Jens Ritter sued us like for making fun about his amp. He couldn't care less. He probably sold already 2 or 3 of them, and he's a lucky and probably well-situated guy. But there was this one guy who commented like, how dare you, you don't understand it. Ritter amps are like pieces of art and blah, blah, blah. I was like, so what?
Big fucking deal. It's not like we're telling people not to buy it. We're just from a more practical position. We're trying to look at it as, let's say the both of us wanted to buy that amp and we put our money together, we still wouldn't have enough fucking money to buy one of his amps, So how realistic is it for the guy playing in a bar or even someone touring, with like a well-known artist? Why the fuck would you bring a $40,000 amplifier with you on the road? Some people can, and I'm sure some do, like someone like Joe Bonamassa will bring like the Dumble amps and all that, but
he does. Yeah, but he brings all the good shit all the time. Yeah. I don't know. I don't want to know how high the insurance per day is for bringing all that shit. If it gets lost or broken or stolen, hopefully it doesn't. But
and I'm sure someone could laugh at Joe Bonamassa for doing this, but I think that in that situation he can afford it. He's got a shit ton of amplifiers. The guy's a guitar collector, an amp collector. So he can afford to do it. And I'm sure he's been on the road since he's like fucking 11 years old. So he's spent most of his life touring. I'm sure he knows what the fuck he's doing. So I'm not worried for him that his shit's going to get stolen. It's just like I was watching this a few months ago. It was like a rig rundown for Brian May, and the tech for Brian May has to keep his original guitar with him at all times. Like they cannot let that guitar go in a van somewhere or whatever. This guy has that thing like there's $100,000 in the fucking case.
Shit.
So that's what they came up with. He's still touring with the original guitar, and it's worth a fuck ton of money. And if someone stole it, there's nothing else like it.
Yeah.
So it's great that some musicians can do that. But if you and I went on tour together and we're like, hey, what are you bringing? I'm bringing my Squire. I'm bringing like maybe my Line 6 HX Stomp and maybe a few like, I don't know, new X or Joyo pedals. And I'm keeping it fucking basic. Why? Because I can't afford to rebuy the stuff that I bought that is really expensive.
No.
And
impossible.
So for touring musician, maybe some can afford to get like that Ritter amplifier for like $40,000 or whatever the fuck it is. But from our standpoint, if we make that kind of joke about it, It's just that we're looking at it from the, oh yeah, maybe it looks great in your condo in Milan, but if you live in buttfuck Canada and like there's like 500 people in your town, who cares that you paid $40,000 for your amp? You know, it's like it's just ridiculous. You know,
amazing. We went so much and so deep into this, pedal topic that we don't have time anymore to go into the topic that I originally wanted to. I wanted to talk about YouTube craziness. But let's say our next episode is going to be about YouTube craziness, and about some of the crazy high fees that some YouTubers actually call for videos. Because that was something I wanted to talk about, because it was kind of a topic that was moving me a lot, talking to a few guys in the industry, and they told me, at this point it's just, ridiculous to find someone with a decent following, getting a video done. It's like the prices you pay don't justify. There's just no relation. There's no relationship between what you pay and what you're going to get for it. But yeah, let's talk about that in the next episode. I'm also going to see if I can find more people and get like some more feedback, maybe even from a couple of YouTubers. We've already passed the hour that but only like 15, 16 minutes, so it's not too bad.
Hey, it was fun.
It was a lot of fun, as always. And as always, we would like to say thank you for listening and for watching, whatever you are doing, whatever platform you're using. If you're using YouTube as a platform, we highly appreciate if you hit the subscribe button and the bell icon. Doesn't cost you anything, but definitely helps us to, grow and get more interesting guests on the podcast in the future. And there's also ways to interact on Spotify and on the other platforms. So whatever you want to interact with and share, you can do it on all of those respective platforms. And until next week and next week's episode, we say salute.
Cheers.
Cheers.